Hello, and welcome back to the Science and Wisdom of Emotion Summit. My name is Shankari Goldstein, and I'm the host of the Inspiring Minds series for the Mind and Life Institute. It's a beautiful day here, and I'm joining you from the unceded territory of the Monacan tribe here in Scottsville, Virginia, in the United States. I also want to acknowledge and create a safer space of healing for our global majority communities of color who are tuning in with us today, and holding a space for the extreme crisis in India, as well as our LGBTQ communities, who in the face of blind injustice continue to face daily acts of violence and systemic oppression. Just holding you all in my heart and our hearts. Go slow and be steady in these moments. As of this morning, over 97,000 of us from over 140 countries around the world are gathering to explore the science of wisdom and emotions. Our numbers have continued to grow each day, which only shows that there's a deep need for connection and understanding of these practices. If you're joining us now, please take a moment to say hello in the chat or the comments section and let us know where or whose unceded territory you're tuning in from. It's so wonderful to get a feeling for everyone that's present today as we begin this practice. And we're going to be turning off the chat during John and I's conversation till the very end to just say goodbye to each other. So before we get started, I want to mention that after John speaks and leads us in a guided meditation, we're going to be taking Q&A with a live audience with John and video, live Q&A and audio and video from those of you joining us live on Zoom. We really want to hear from as many of you as possible, and John's really excited to hear your questions. So please don't be shy. And I'll be giving more instructions about how the Q&A works when we get to that section. I also just want to mention that we will have captions and translations available for this session within 24 hours when we post the recording, and we thank you for your patience. It's a pleasure to get to show up and hold space, not just as a host for this event, but as a dedicated seeker for the last 10 years. And I have the pleasure of holding my second virtual dialogue with John Kabat Zinn. And I am so excited to have this chance to peel back this veil of mindfulness and fulfillment with John even deeper. It's really just such an honor. So I'm going to do a brief introduction of John. John is a professor of medicine emeritus at the University of Massachusetts Medical School, where he founded the Center for Mindfulness in Medicine, Healthcare, and Society, and is a world-renowned mindfulness-based stress reduction NBSR clinic, and the clinic. He's the author of 10 books, including the bestsellers Full Catastrophe, Living Where You Go, There You Are, and Mindfulness for Beginners. His work has contributed to a growing movement of mindfulness into mainstream institutions and much more. There's over 700 hospitals and medical centers around the world that now offer clinical programs based on his training alone. It's really wonderful to be back in space with you, John. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, Shankari. It's wonderful to be back with you. It's a real honor to participate in this whole gathering.
Yes. So as always, the two of us could sit here for hours probably talking about the current polarizing times that we live in, but we only get you for a short period of time today. So I'm just going to jump right in into some big questions about emotions, life, and human suffering, and how we can adapt and show up in the world, while also being mindful that today is about embodying the practice, and you're going to be leading us through a guided practice as well. And I just want to invite that spaciousness as we go through this conversation for us to ground down into these takeaways too, and take moments of pause. So I want to begin this moment with how we are currently surviving these challenging times, which you and I have chatted about several times. And it led me to think about 20 years ago, back to the original Destructive Emotions dialogue. His Holiness said that the times that we were living in were significant and also filled with such hardships. And here was this group of young scholars and activists that had real enthusiasm for change. And His Holiness was emphasizing to everyone that by gathering and discussing these topics, perhaps there could finally be a realization that our mental state and being able to change our mental state could be a true pathway to creating a better world. So in these times, there were just a handful of you really doing this deep work of understanding the spiritual practices through a scientific lens. And now we currently have 97,000 people tuning in with us for this event. It feels like the work that our organizations have done have really made an imprint on our global society. And yet, I'm sure there are people that are new to these concepts and teachings joining us as well today. So just to help you land in this moment, all of us land in this moment, what are some personal reflections or even perhaps the significance of this moment, seeing how this work has evolved and developed over the last 20 years?
Well, I wasn't at the 2000 conference that's now, we're celebrating the 20th anniversary of it. The subject was destructive emotions. I was not able to attend. I attended a conference 10 years earlier in Dharamsala with His Holiness called Healing Emotions. A number of the same people participated in that. And it was actually 11 years after mindfulness-based stress reduction started, which was in 1979. So we're past the 40th anniversary celebration for MBSR and other mindfulness-based interventions in the world of healthcare and medicine, and that have moved out into all sorts of different domains in the world. So the confluence of these deep wisdom traditions that come out of the meditative work of, millennia, and of Western science and culture is really a unique moment on the planet. It was unthinkable, say 50 years ago, that mainstream science would in some sense be at all interested in ancient wisdom and dharma, and that we could have profitable conversations curated and catalyzed by His Holiness's love for humanity and love for the beauty of meditative wisdom and compassion, to bring together so many different people whose lives were really committed in some way to meditation, but not really able to bring it into the domain of work or science in the way that was really required for the magnitude of the problems we're facing in the world. That was either 20 or 40 years ago, but they're nothing compared to how we understand the magnitude of what we're facing now. So this could not happen at a better time, this convergence of contemplative practice and scientific understanding of the potential for the arc in all human beings for learning, growing, healing, and transformation. And that arc is something that we are all capable of. And it's not so much a filling up of our heads with more details about either the brain or neuroplasticity or dharma, but it's about the deep investigation of the nature of our own being and the nature of our own minds. And we've demonstrated through the past 40 years of MBSR and all sorts of other mindfulness-based interventions for medical and psychiatric problems, like mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, for instance, that people throughout the world can really, really benefit from something that on its face looks a lot like nothing and turns out, as I like to say, to be just about everything. So there's beautiful paradoxes here that actually energize and propel our capacity as human beings to heal a lot of the deep wounds and trauma that we're facing, as well as the problems that we generate in terms of, global warming and just injustice on so many different levels, whether it be racial injustice or whether it be economic injustice or for that matter, sort of planetary injustice. So this is a wake-up moment for humanity, and I think this convergence of science and deep dharmic wisdom that's profoundly universal, not merely Buddhist, as His Holiness has been emphasizing across the entire arc of his life. And he said for this 2000 meeting on destructive emotions, if there's anything that science discovers about what we do that is valuable in the world, then we need to make it available to people regardless of where they're from or what their belief systems are or their religious persuasion.
Yeah, you mentioned about going into the deeper recesses of the mind. I think that's how you worded it. I'm sorry if I misunderstood, but there's such an urgency for these teachings. And what His Holiness was talking about and sharing 20 years ago about was this need to like overcome poverty, ignorance, lack of education, and that perhaps the old methods were not meant for these new problems that we're facing currently today, because, or even then, because new problems were arising each day. And he really challenged those in the room to look at how we can evolve and adapt and face these problems by developing new trainings and et cetera, which you've done. And I agree. And there's also so much history and systemic issues across the globe that need addressing. And I guess for me as a practitioner being in space with you, it's hard for me sometimes as a woman of color and a fervent activist for the environment, the food sovereignty movement, regenerative agriculture movement, and just the protection and amplification of people of color, to hear people sometimes in our spiritual community focus so much on the traditional Western individualism of the spiritual mindfulness practice, even though we know that there's research that proves mindfulness leads to reduction in bias and discrimination. For me, it feels like there's this lack of moving into the deep shadow work of the self. And you spoke about that, like really needing to get into the deep parts of the practice. So what is some advice or just insights that you could say to people in communities like myself who really feel that without collective care and action taken towards a significant systemic change, that vision of a better world that you just spoke about and that His Holiness shared, it might not exist for some of us. In many ways, we're like at this fork in the road of extinction or liberation.
Yeah, well, it's beautifully articulated. And I would say that that's true no matter what group, social group you identify with. That's true for humanity as a whole. But it's very important that we not paper over significant difference and significant differences in traditions and in values and in caring, and pretend that it's all just kumbaya and we're all one, and these practices, although they seem to be individualistic, aren't really, that they apply more globally. It's my sort of sense that the energy that's arising through just participating in all the various things that are going on in these 3 or 4 days that Mind and Life is offering us, and all sorts of other things during the course of this pandemic and for even decades before, there's something interesting happening here where we're beginning to realize, if we didn't before, that it's not about sort of my individual liberation or my individual happiness or my individual calmness or reduced stress or even liberation from suffering or pain, but that the first thing one discovers when one pays attention to one's own mind and heart and the space of awareness and open-heartedness, open-hearted presence, is that the fact of the profound interconnectedness of the universe on every single level. And so, but there's also diversity in that in an enormously beautiful way, that life is diverse and there's enormous health in that. But there's been so much violence associated with ussing and theming over the centuries,
Right.
and degrading other people and dehumanizing them, that now what mindfulness or meditative awareness is really calling for us is to recognize that our awareness is conditioned and limited by our trajectory through life, and we need each other and each other's perspectives. Just as you mentioned, you know, the ceded territory that you happen to be occupying that was stolen from indigenous peoples, whether it's in Virginia where you're sitting or Massachusetts where I'm sitting or wherever, that, you know, we need to learn from each other. And I'm really applaud the diversity of this 4 or 5 days and the presenters that I've learned an awful lot from people, you know, talking about, say, their own spiritual traditions that are, you know, traditional indigenous traditions.
Right.
So mindfulness, in order to really be mindfulness, has to be inclusive on that kind of level. And I think what's happening is that we're not decontextualizing Dharma, but we're recontextualizing Dharma. And it's not like we intended for this to happen. It's in some sense, the world is doing us. There's no separation. And the question is, are we going to learn these lessons, or are we going to, you know, flame out through our own greed, hatred, and delusion? So this is powerful medicine, whether we're talking about healthcare or whether we're talking about dealing with racist, you know, conditions in our own country or in other countries. And this is where the rubber meets the road. And so taking individual responsibility has to have a parallel with taking a kind of a collective responsibility and deep listening to others. And then let's just put it on the table, a planetary responsibility as well, where we're taking care of the entire ecosystem, not just the planet, but all life forms, because we don't know how we are dependent on them. And the pandemic has shown us, like, you know, this will not be the last virus that we get hit with. And so we have to learn how to be mindful before it's too late as a species.
Yeah, thank you so much. You addressed so much about what I wanted to talk to you about, and we can even go a little deeper with each aspect of what you just mentioned. And I think it's so important to attune to these harder aspects that in the end are just so easy to ignore as a, you know, a mindfulness practitioner, and just avoid the discomfort. And like you said, I think it's that we are beginning to understand that it takes commitment to a practice, and allowing meditation, as you put it so beautifully when you and I've chatted, like to be this graceful dance of life unfolding. And it requires this deep, you know, sense of understanding the principles of suffering. And you just mentioned Dharma. So maybe we could shift to the concept of Dharma, which are the teachings of the Buddha to overcome dissatisfaction or suffering. And in the first and second noble truths, the Buddha talks extensively about the forms and causes of suffering. Many of these are attributed to destructive emotions. So how do we begin for new practitioners on the call, or even you know, veteran practitioners on the call? How do we begin to explore the concept and the importance of impermanence and non-attachment, and the ever-evolving changes in our emotions and our bodies and the climate around us? How do we embody the metaphor, is the glass half empty or half full?
I think that the invitation is really to discover or uncover, or dare I say even recover, what it means to be truly human and embodied. If you just consider yourself from a scientific point of view, and from a materialist point of view for a second, there are more atoms in the human body than there are stars in the Milky Way galaxy. An inconceivable number of them. Atoms are also so inconceivably small that we can't really, our minds can't tune into that. But physicists and cosmologists do actually do that work using a language that's called mathematics and then scientific verification. And so we are miraculous beings. I mean, on any level that you want to, you know, name it. I mean, that. So at every level, from atoms to molecules to macromolecules to cells and intracellular structures and tissues and organ systems. I mean, you know, when you just say there are 86,000 or approximately, neurons in the brain. 80, I'm sorry, 86
Oh my
billion
gosh.
neurons in the brain and trillions of neuronal synaptic connections. So there's no question that each one of us is a miraculous being and a genius, or the Buddhists might say, a Buddha, in potential Buddha. What was really required is waking up to that. So then there's no one right way to do it. There are an infinite number of ways to actually realize what it means to be human. And that's in some sense the invitation to recognize and then realize, instantiate what we most love. So I like to actually frame meditation practice, formal or informal. When you're taking your seat in some formal way, it's like a laboratory, but it takes a lot of work to do that. And it's really a discipline, and it pays off just like exercise is a discipline. You can't think about having a nice run and having your body or mind benefit from it. But when you, make that commitment to yourself, then it's transformative. And it's the same with formal meditation practice. But I would say we need to look at it as like so commonsensical that it's actually a radical act of sanity and a radical act of love to take one seat or just drop into the present moment. That doesn't mean I'm isolating myself in a cocoon and I don't care about others. It's like, what is the present moment? Nothing but interconnectedness. And when I look out there and I see, first of all, I look into my own mind, I see a lot of violence. I see a lot of fear. I see a lot of contraction. I see a lot of aversion, liking some people, not liking other people, seeing how I could put my other people into boxes very quickly because of my own conditioning. But you see, the element of being human that knows that sees it, that apprehends it, which is called awareness. We all have it already. We don't have to get it. It's not like I'm meditating to get awareness. You're meditating because you are awareness, but we are so self-distracted most of the time that we actually don't realize that we're awake, which is what the word Buddha means. So the potential is always here for us to wake up and then realize what's actually going on. And then, because there's an ethical foundation to this, because if you're acting unethically, sooner or later, you're going to create turmoil in your own mind, which will create suffering and for others. So when we ground ourselves in this kind of love affair, then life itself is the meditation practice, not sitting on your ass and cushion or doing other kinds of formal practices or yoga. They're all different doors into the same room. And the room is this love affair with life and with the willingness to find one's own way or one's own community's way to contribute maximal well-being and benefit, and minimizing our potential both by commission and omission to create harm. And boy, do we create harm by both commission and omission. And so this is kind of, again, a kind of love affair with our potential for being all we can be, which is a kind of ironically a poster, from the military, a recruitment poster for the United States Army is be all you can be, or maybe it's the Marines, I don't remember. But the point is, like, why not? And in fact, at this moment on Spaceship Earth, given the pandemic and given global warming, we need all hands on deck on Buckminster Fuller's Spaceship Earth. And we got to remember, is like the people on the other side of the planet, they're on the same spaceship, and we don't have a planet B, so to speak. So this is a moment where mindfulness, wisdom, emotional clarity, compassion, and a certain kind of profound regard for the humanity and beauty of others is not a luxury or some kind of, sort of second order path to satisfaction. It's the curriculum of this moment of humanity is actually going to find a way to be on this planet that our children's children's children are not going to, curse us for, because we did not take a stand in this moment to heal the greed, the hatred, and the ignorance, and the historical trauma that we have generated, and then tried to rationalize and say, well, it's going to take another 400 years, or it's going to take another. We don't have, 400 years. We may not have 40 years if we don't wake up as a world. And that's why mindfulness is absolutely central to this. And just so people who are new to it realize it, when I use the word mindfulness, I mean it as synonymous with pure awareness. And it's not something any of us have to get or cultivate. We're born with this capacity. It's a miraculous capacity. What we're engaged in when we slow down, when we drop in on ourselves, when we open to the actuality of things, is we're cultivating access to this vast, boundless domain of human awareness that is intrinsically wise, is intrinsically clear, and is intrinsically compassionate, and is intrinsically not caught in all of the habitual ways in which we do what I call selfing, that it's all about me and the personal pronouns, I, me, my, I, me, and mine. And this is kind of a disease that is its own form of epidemic, that kind of greed, that kind of contraction around the personal pronouns. And so that's what the practice is all about. And I see this conference and all of the different multiplicity of contributions, and many that are not part of this conference, because it's a much larger universe out there that is, doing this heart work in the deepest of ways. It's its own contagious flowering, so to speak. It's a positive meme that is a wake-up call, inviting us to recognize the beauty in each other and be all we can be while we still have the chance, which means waking up and loving what is, as Byron Katie says.
Yeah, thank you. And I think so many people are waking up, and I'm holding that, just by seeing
No question about it.
97,000 people with us today. It's like incredible. And the last thing I want to ask you is, with that, knowing that there's also so much psychological and emotional stress that we're all feeling, most of us are feeling, and it manifests itself in so many different ways. And you've really invited us today and throughout your talks, throughout the global pandemic, to move beyond cognition into deeper states of the heart and attend to our social and emotional well-being. And I think people are certainly beginning to come out of these deep states of hibernation and isolation, but there are so many people still feeling stuck there. So what can you offer viewers in the way of a launch pad for a daily mindfulness practice? And while just going back just a little bit to the self, do you think it's important to practice more self-care, compassion, or karuna for oneself when they're integrating these daily practices into your life? Because I know you and I talked about the straitjacket, feel like being hard on oneself when they start these meditation practices.
Well, I wish we had many, many more hours to delve into this, because it really is infinitely rich. But the short answer before we move into guided meditation practice is absolutely, of course, that this is where the rubber meets the road. When we actually let go, there's a lot of paradox in this work. And let go of trying to improve ourselves. Meditation has nothing to do with improving yourself, because from the perspective that I've been enunciating, there's no improving on you. You're already perfect. I mean, we're going to improve on the Milky Way galaxy? Are we going to improve on this constellation of infinite number of atoms and molecules and, billions of neurons and trillions of, such synaptic connections? And on every level, it's perfect. So when I get depressed or I get anxious, it's like, who is that? Why are you not appreciating? Now, that doesn't mean there's not, every reason to get depressed or, about the indignities and the injustice in this world. But that's in some sense shooting ourselves in the heart when we need to sort of be all mobilized to act out of wisdom, okay, which is a theme of this conference. We have to actually realize what it would mean to act out of wisdom, to embody wisdom. And everybody's going to do this slightly differently, but the engagement in caring is itself a radical act of compassion and wisdom. And it also invites all emotions to be part of this. It's not like there are bad emotions and good emotions. And a lot of the presenters have been emphasizing this. So we need to get out of this dualistic framework and recognize that, as it says in the Heart Sutra, the Prajna Paramita Sutra, there's no place to go, nothing to do, and nothing to attain. Okay, because the reason there's nothing to attain is you're already complete. You're already whole. And when the awareness recognizes its own wakefulness, then that becomes a place that you can live, and then you act in the world according to what's required, what's called for. Social activism, putting your body on the line, whatever, parenting. And in the time of this transition out of the pandemic, well, the planet's not transitioning out of the pandemic. India is like in a kind of just horrible situation. And many, many other of the poorest countries on the planet are, unfortunately, in all probability, going to suffer a lot more and a lot more death and a lot more loss before the planet itself, takes care of all of us. Okay, we need to take care of everybody on the planet, or we'll be in perpetual pandemic. So this is a very, very big challenge. But when we drop in ourselves, because of the profound interconnectedness of the world, in a very real way, when you are in touch with the full dimensionality of your being, the world, which is completely interconnected like a crystal, as soon as one atom in the crystal is different, the entire crystal lattice structure is different. So the universe is different when you're who you really are, and you're not lost in anxiety or depression or, or anger or indignation. We can mobilize all those forces for the good, but we have to be aware that we might be inadvertently creating harm. So we need each other. This is a point that I really think is really important. We need to listen to each other, and especially the people that we don't like, or that we don't like the way they talk or the way they look or the way they think. Because if we just stay in our own little kumbaya groups, then we kind of, in some sense, are part of the problem rather than part of the solution. So, I think it might make sense at this point to just invite people to take a moment and just resonate in the space of what's been voiced in our conversation here, Shankri. And also bring into the present moment your motivation for tuning into this particular feature of the conference, because there's so many different things. I mean, nobody can, sort of really do them all. So what is your motivation for tuning in now to this one? And letting that just kind of marinate in you for a while. What are you really looking for, listening for, hoping for? And can you recognize that longing, that yearning, that curiosity, that interest is a powerful force in your own life and in the world, potentially? And what the meditation practice that we'll be going through is basically inviting you to not try to get anywhere else, Not think that there's any way in which you need to improve on yourself, as I said, but to simply drop into being for this moment, because we happen to be in front of screens, and so we can't be, all together being activists in the world, if, or even in labs or whatever. Right now, we're just here in our individual spaces, but in our hearts, the technology is allowing us, no matter how many thousands of people are on this call, to be part of some larger unfolding that is a profound manifestation of our caring, of our love, of our compassion. And so let me invite you to establish yourself, if you're sitting, in a posture that embodies wakefulness and dignity. And you don't have to be sitting. You could be lying down. The older I get, the more I become a fan of lying down meditations. And of course, there's the big occupational hazard of falling asleep when you're lying down, especially in the corpse pose, lying on your back. But that's a hurdle that is easily overcome. And then, since we spend so much time lying down, falling asleep, or at least trying to fall asleep, what about trying to fall awake? So whether you're sitting or standing or lying down or standing on your head or whatever, can we actually experience the body as a whole? And I'll say sitting here or whatever is going on for you. And just see if you can feel the body as a whole, sitting, whether it's on a cushion on the floor, whether it's on a chair, as I am at the moment. Feeling the spine self-elevating out of the pelvis rooted or grounded on the seat or cushion. The entirety of the upper torso anchored to the spine, the neck and the head, shoulders and chest and arms and hands. And just opening to inhabiting this moment. Full awareness of the body sitting here. And it will be hard not to notice that the body's doing this remarkable thing day and night, whether you forget about it or not, that we call breathing. And it's actually, receptors in our airways that are the primary target of the coronavirus. So this thing that's not alive, that's a virus, has found a way to connect with some macromolecular structure in our airways that actually puts us at risk of dying. So if at the moment you can breathe naturally, this is something to celebrate, not take for granted. It won't be forever. So can you actually put the welcome mat out for the entire universe of breath sensations in the body? And ride on the full duration of this breath coming in and this breath leaving the body with 100% awareness. As if your life depended on it, which of course it does, in more ways than you think and in more ways than any of us can possibly think. So this is not trying to get anyplace else, but it's an invitation to actually invite ourselves to be as we are in this moment and attend to it by paying attention. And seeing that you can expand the field of your awareness around your breathing, whether it's in the primarily seen in the or felt in the belly or in the chest or in the upper airway or at the nose, until it includes this sense of the whole body sitting and breathing, including the envelope of your skin and the dignified, beautiful carriage of the body, a human being sitting or lying down or standing or whatever, falling awake, riding on the waves of the breath coming in and going out. And befriending the potential for stillness here, for not having to fill up the mind with anything, but to just keep our primary focus on the body breathing. And for those of you who are new to meditation, this may come as a surprise, but for those of you who are not new to meditation, it's no surprise at all. The mind has a life of its own, and no matter what you, whoever you think you are, tell it about how this meditation should unfold, the mind's going to do whatever the hell the mind is going to do, which means that it may be very labile and not landing on or staying on the breath sensations in the body or a sense of the body as a whole, even for one full in-breath or one full out-breath. So there's an extra instruction that's really, really, really important. And that is when you notice that your mind is off someplace else, let's say caught up in a thought about the past or the future, and maybe it has a high emotional valence or charge, the awareness that notices that at a certain point will notice that, hey, the breath is long gone, the body's long gone. Here I am caught up in the past or the future and some kind of, emotional turmoil or whirlpool or turbulence. So you can actually notice, whoa, your own awareness caught this. And you can look and see, is my awareness actually caught in it, or did it just catch it, register it? And when it registers it, you can invite your attention to come back to the body sitting here breathing, the body as a whole. It's not a bad idea to note what's on your mind whenever it wanders. But then just let it be. Don't push it away. Don't pursue it. Just let it be and come back to your primary object of attention, which is, for now, the body sitting and breathing. So your awareness is functioning here. It's not about the body. It's not about the breathing. It's about awareness itself. Can we learn to actually inhabit the space of our own awareness in this moment, in virtually any moment, and see that in some sense, we're not our thoughts, we're not our emotions, we're not our sensations, we're not our pain. They all are part of this universe of being human, and they all require some degree of attending and some degree of deep listening to, learning from, coming to terms with, which is my working definition of healing, especially when we're going through really scary, really stressful, really painful periods in our lives, which most of us are now by virtue of what's going on in the world in terms of COVID. And we can just put out the welcome mat for all of that and realize that the awareness is big enough to hold it all. In fact, it's boundless. Now, I would challenge you to experiment over the next few days, weeks, months, years, decades with seeing if you can find the center of your own awareness or the circumference or the periphery of your own awareness. Not even sure that, it's appropriate for us to use the word own at all. Or, our own awareness. It's just awareness. We don't create it, but we can inhabit it. It's kind of a space that is inhabitable and that we can be aware of, that we can be aware of everything that goes on in the space, including thoughts and emotions, however reactive, however toxic. And the awareness is not actually stressed by it, tainted by it. It's already a whole new domain that could become our default mode, so to speak, where we default to awareness when we are under stress or in pain, and then see and learn from that engagement that you're not your thoughts. They can be incredibly important. Not your emotions. They also incredibly important. But how we are in relationship to makes all the difference between endless suffering and kind of graceful freedom that allows us to actually function and be effective in the world in ways that otherwise we're kind of like walking with, weights on our ankles, heavy weights. So right now, right here in this moment, let's expand or explore expanding the field of awareness beyond the body sitting here breathing, and just opening it up to whatever arises in this boundless field of awareness. Sometimes this is called open presence, sometimes it's called choiceless awareness, but whatever you call it, just resting here in awareness itself and being the knowing and the not knowing that your awareness already is. And if there's no place to go, nothing to do, and nothing to attain, then for this timeless moment we call now, we're simply here, life expressing itself. The heart wide open, the mind also wide open. And whatever arises within the heart and the mind, events in the field of awareness that we can discern with wisdom, with equanimity, with compassion, including for those personal pronouns that contract in us and make a big story about my suffering. And in this moment, be be free. Not after 20 years of hard practice. This moment, at least relatively free for now. If you ever feel kind of like lost or at a loss in this vast spaciousness of your own awareness, you can always come back to the body and to the breath, and that can serve as a kind of anchor or home base. But then the awareness is always boundless, whether you're featuring breath sensations in the body or the body as a whole, or thoughts in the mind or sounds in the air. The awareness is always here. So we can forget as many times as we want. And as soon as we remember, here we are again. Whole, W-H-O-L-E. Fully who we are. Carrying whatever it is that we're carrying, which is the root meaning, carry. To carry, by the way, is the root meaning of the word to suffer. We're carrying a lot. Some of it's even intergenerational trauma. But we're also carrying a lot of beauty. And often that goes unrecognized. And intergenerational beauty too. So can we find a way to, right in this moment, be whole ourselves, W-H-O-L-E, which we are, and we'll never be more whole than in this moment. We'll just be older. And that's true no matter what you're going through, no matter how much torment you're going through at the moment, you're still intrinsically whole for now. And if you recognize that, that can be profoundly healing. And can we also recognize that we're part of larger and larger circles or spheres or universes of wholeness, profound interconnectedness, profound interdependency, including family, including generations of family going back, ancestors, including land, including mountains, including rivers, including oceans, including the sky, including the heart. All right here in this moment, in this timeless moment. And so we could say that awareness is synonymous with silence. And although I'm using a lot of words, I invite you to actually find the silence inside and underneath this stream of words and drop in. That's an invitation that's 24/7. The real meditation practice is life itself. It's not sitting. Sitting practice, any formal meditation practice, any formal mindful yoga practice, or whatever your practices are, they are profoundly important and to be cultivated and developed with discipline and intentionality. But as long as they're sequestered into something special, you're basically devaluing them because it's all special. Every moment is special. So the real meditation, how willing are we to show up in this moment, in every moment in our lives, and face the enormity, what I sometimes call the full catastrophe of the human condition, the good, the bad, the ugly, in ourselves, in the world, and then affirm our commitment to finding a larger wholeness, a we instead of a me, a we that includes all life, not just all humanity, a common purpose because we have a common home in empty space, the planet Earth. It's really miraculous environment for us to cultivate wisdom. And we need each other desperately to do that. No single view or no single person can do it alone. We need each other, and we need the voices that often are the ones that may be the hardest to hear. And maybe a lot of that is because the suffering is so deep we don't want to even go near it. But when we are willing to put the welcome mat out in that way, put our toe in the water, maybe even whether it regards our own pain and suffering or the suffering of, indigenous peoples or the suffering of people of color, what's going on in India at the moment with COVID. I mean, there are just an infinite number of places where at any given moment, the suffering is enormous. And then there's something that is equally enormous that can hold the suffering and transmute it, transform it. For now, at least here, and propel us to act, to engage, to embody what we most care about, and to live lives of integrity in the face of this full catastrophe. To dance with it, to learn from it, to listen deeply, to grow, to love our way into our common miraculous nature. And to address the suffering by omission and commission that we ourselves are creating and so easily can ignore. Just this moment, just this breath, just this awareness, just this sitting here, just this being human, just this, just this. And I'll just leave you with a poem, one of my favorite poems by Derek Walcott, who is from the island of St. Lucia in the Caribbean, Afro-Caribbean Nobel laureate poet. Many of you may know this poem, but drink it in not just through the ears, but through every pore in your body, your heart. The time will come when, with elation, you will greet yourself arriving at your own door, in your own mirror, and each will smile at the other's welcome and say, sit here, eat. You will love again the stranger who was yourself. Give wine, give bread, give back your heart to yourself, to the stranger who has loved you all your life, who you have ignored for another who knows you by heart. Take down the love letters from the bookshelf, the photographs, the desperate notes. Peel your own image from the mirror. Sit. Feast on your life. So you'll notice that I did not ring any bells to start the quote unquote meditation. I'm not ringing any bells to signal the end of the so-called meditation, because the meditation goes on. It's none other than life itself when we're willing to actually open to it, show up for it, be present in it, and not get caught up in the turmoil of our own most contracted thought streams or emotional reactivity, but to recognize that the very turmoil are occasions for us to actually practice and to recognize and to realize that that is not our true nature, and that the awareness function that recognizes that is not only inhabitable, but completely embodied in any moment that you're willing to wake up. And then from here, when the doing that we engage in, activism, acting in the world, making something of value in the world, helping people, when that doing comes out of being, it's an entirely different doing. And it's exactly, I believe, what is called for at this moment in time for us to, as a species, wake up to the name we gave ourselves, Homo sapiens sapiens, the species that is aware and is aware that we are aware. I think we have a little bit more living into it to do, but we don't have necessarily infinite time, but we do have infinite love if we're willing to recognize it. And that, we're not talking about it, but a lot of other people have been in this conference, has infinite effects on the body, which are actually very interesting, as well as on neuronal connectivity, functional connectivity, all sorts of interesting things that this practice, which looks so much like nothing, turns out to be, from the Shakespearean point of view, not much ado about nothing, but the exact opposite, much ado about virtually everything. So I would love to actually engage in some dialogue with whoever, out of these 1.8 thousand participants that are on this, and then probably close to as many on the other platforms. Could we engage in a little bit of inquiry and dialogue? And remember, this is as much a part of the meditation. It's not all about silence. It's about engagement, wakefulness, embodied presence. So the deep listening to the questions and where they're coming from and whatever responses emerge, very important. But let me say, because there won't be that much time for so many questions, if you have questions, look at where the question is actually coming from in yourself by just opening up and dropping in. And I think you'll find that very often, close to where the question bubbled up from, like a bubble on the pot of a bubble on the bottom of a pot of boiling water that slowly rises to the surface, right next to that bubble coming up with the question, probably a whole fauna of answers that you know the answers to your own questions, because otherwise, in a very real way, how would you be able to formulate those questions? And if you don't know, the not knowing is as much a part of the knowing of awareness as the knowing element of awareness. That's one of the paradoxes and the beauty of this work, with this practice.
Thank you, John. So as we prepare to take these live video questions from those of you who are joining us via Zoom, if you'd like to ask a question live, please write your question in the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. The Q&A function is different from the chat function, which we're going to turn on the last few minutes as we're saying goodbye to each other. And at the beginning of your question, write live, L-I-V-E, so that we know that you have a functioning microphone and camera, and then write your name, where you're from, and finally your question. And if we choose your question in about 5 minutes, you'll hear me call your name, and then you'll be brought up live, so please be ready. A window will pop up asking you to enable your camera and microphone. Click yes, you'll be on. And so, yeah, we've got some questions populated, but as we're getting that all organized on our side, I do have a quick question for you, John, as people are getting prepared here. On the topic of the current climate crisis, we know the laws of nature state that the more we give, the more we receive, and yet we continue to ignore and strip away the beauty and gifts of this earth. What are you seeing as the pathway to coming back into right relationship and reciprocity with nature? And how do we honor the great and painful legacies before us of Indigenous people who truly found ways to deeply connect and honor this planet?
Well, thank you for that question. There's no question that we have a great deal to learn from Indigenous cultures, because they were able to live in a self-sustaining way on the planet for millennia. And in 200 years of the Industrial Revolution, our industriousness, our cleverness, steam engines and electricity and, jet engines and everything else, and nuclear power plants, we've managed to actually, as some cultures might say, harm our mother. Mm. So we need to listen to each other, and we need to develop a whole range of new, innovative ways to, in a very short period of time, 2 decades at the most, go down to zero carbon emission, zero net carbon emission on the planet, on the planetary scale. And there's a lot of injustice and inequality here, because the developed nations have already gotten to a point where maybe we can do that. But what about the less developed nations that need to burn more coal and need to do all this just to keep people, alive, and to keep their own trajectory towards economic, well-being going? So these are gigantic problems, but that's why we need all hands on deck, at the moment. And it's like, it won't work if some countries solve the problem of CO2 emission and methane emission, and the other countries don't, because it's one atmosphere, it's one planet. So the challenges are huge, but part of the love affair for me is that I have a deep confidence in what's most beautiful about humanity. Mm. And when pushed to the edge, unfortunately, we have to be pushed to the edge sometimes. We actually wake up. And I think we really need to honor indigenous cultures and invite them to play a major role in helping us reclaim that sacred quality of deep belonging and connectedness and reverence for this earth, this sky, this, these waters, because they all run within us. We breathe in the sky every day. We breathe in, we drink in the waters. The earth is, the body is the same as the body of the planet. And if we pollute the planet, we're polluting ourselves. So this is a kind of moment that I think we're going to see an enormous amount of creativity in the next 20 or 30 years.
Yeah.
On institutional levels, individual levels, activist levels, everything, but collaborating for one common purpose, as opposed to everybody going off in their own direction at cross purposes. We have to do that. How we're going to do it, I don't know, but that's why we do this kind of work, because the possibilities are infinite, and they are the present moment. Just like the Big Bang, there was nothing, and then all of a sudden there's like everything, and no one really knows how that happened. But everybody who studies it agrees that that did happen. Well, every one of us is, in some sense, has the potential, or us collectively on Earth, of a big bang, an expansion of the mind, an understanding of the body and of the interconnectedness, so that we actually thread that needle while we have the chance.
Yeah, well, thank you. That was so rich. And I know I'm personally looking forward to a time when we heed the call of our, animate earth, and lifting and personification of the richness of the ecology of spirit, which you touched on. I think we have quite a few questions now. And so first, I'd love to invite Maria Fernandez up, and she's from Argentina. And it'll take just a few moments maybe to pull her up. There she is. Omaho Fernandez. Okay.
Oh, yes.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi. Hello.
Hi. Oh.
Hi.
Hi
Hi.
there.
Hi.
Please feel free to share your question.
Well, I heard all you said, and I did the meditation with you, but I'm very new in all this kind of ways of thinking. So, which would you recommend to me? How is the way to start with a meditation, or anything that you suggest?
You've already started, whether you know it or not, just by your being interested enough to get on this and to listen to what's going on. If you're listening to other aspects of this 4-day, program. So, I hesitate to give you too much direction about where to start. There are so many wonderful meditation teachers out there. Look around, trust your instincts, let life just kind of direct you in one way or another, but listen deeply for what makes most sense to you. And then, of course, it's all going to be invitational. It's all about how much are you willing to befriend yourself and your own mind, and even when it's very turbulent, and your own body and your own environment and social connections. So it doesn't matter where you start. You've already started, and the curriculum for this is one lifelong, and incredibly varied, so that for everybody, every single one of us has our own pathway of discovery and glide path into the meditation practice. Of course, there are infinite resources, guided meditations, books, apps, all sorts of stuff there will give you a headache. Here's the best app. Here's the best resource. Deep listening. And then the rest will unfold very beautifully. And remember, it's a love affair, and it's really a lifetime's engagement. I won't say work, because it's not work. It's more like play.
Thank you, Maho. So we have a question from Victoria Martino from La Mesa, California. And again, it just takes a few moments to zoom them in. There we go. Hi, Victoria.
Hi, thank you for calling on me.
Yes, please feel free to,
Yeah, well, I asked 3 questions, so I don't know which one you chose.
It's okay, you're here, so whatever comes.
They're all kind of related. I've been struggling actually because of early childhood trauma my whole life, but I didn't realize it consciously until recently, ironically enough, but with a profound lack of self-compassion. And since the pandemic, I've been really intensively engaging with spiritual practices, with meditation, and through a variety like Spirit Rock and other, and actually your meditations too. And I feel it's been really wonderful and wholesome, but I still find that as my compassion towards others has been increasing and increasing and increasing consistently. And just before this call, I was in a metta practice with Sylvia Boorstein, and I just felt wonderful. And I really felt sincerely connected to everyone. But I noticed it's like there's this little rock inside of me that still resists the self metta, the compassion with myself. And I've tried so many different ways to resolve it, and I'm still unable. And I don't feel like it impedes my true compassion for others, but it's, someone said to me, it's like trying to put oxygen masks on everybody else in the world and not forgetting to put it on yourself. So it's clearly not the best procedure. So I just wondered what kind of advice you could give me in this struggle.
Well, I resonate with what you're saying. My suggestion is to just be aware of the whole constellation of thoughts or narrative that says that you're not compassionate to yourself. Be aware of it. Don't try to make yourself more self-compassionate. But to simply be aware of what feels painful, what feels stuck, where you feel like growth wants to happen, but somehow it's not. And just let it be. Don't make it bad. Don't make it a problem. Just attend to it with tenderness. One of the big problems with meditation is when people think that it's about trying to get someplace else, including to enormous self-compassion. If you are willing to simply let yourself be as you are, you'll discover sooner or later, especially if you drop underneath all the thinking and agitation around it, that your nature is compassion. There's no separation between wakefulness and compassion. And the notion of self-compassion, of course, is tied to a notion of self that may actually be constructed and not primary, and in some sense limiting, because that narrative, who we think we are, the stories we tell ourselves about who we are, is infinitesimal compared to the true nature of who we are as human beings. And that's trustworthy. Not, don't take my word for it, but if you play with actually allowing it to be okay to be mindful of how hard it is to be self-compassionate, let's just put it in that way, for, you know, but you can be totally, just be mindful of that and don't worry about it. Your awareness, in some sense, will give you all the data you need for this big adventure of seeing what happens, because you think that you're not compassionate enough towards yourself.
Mm-hmm.
It has nothing to do with thinking. Awareness is a whole independent human intelligence that is at least as powerful as thinking. And we, in school, all we're taught is how to think, but we're not taught how to hold our thoughts in awareness. But by virtue of the fact that we can hold thoughts and emotions in awareness, de facto, it's proof that awareness is bigger than thinking. No matter how big a thought you have the Big Bang, the universe, multiverse, you can hold it in awareness as a thought. And, you know, thoughts are very interesting because they're only kind of like events in the field of awareness, like weather patterns and emotions too. So the storms in the sky-like, space-like field of awareness, which is, as I was saying, boundless. So it's not a big worry if you don't make it into one.
Thank you, Victoria.
Thank you.
We're going to bring up David Goldstein from Orlando, Florida. And while he's coming up, yeah, I appreciate that answer so much, John. It reminds me of a recent conversation that you just had with Anderson Cooper on Wisdom 2.0. And you spoke of one aspect of mindfulness that states to replace negative thoughts with positive thoughts. And I think Anderson was even making the connection of people telling you to relax or calm down when you feel angry. And I love how you shared that it was like kind of this antiquated way of the expression of the modern mindfulness practice. And it was so profound for me as a yoga teacher to hear, because there's so much of our wisdom that is entrenched in the 8 limbs of yogic philosophy, one being pratyahara, which is withdrawal of the senses and replacing negative impressions with positive ones. And I just love that you spoke more of deepening those connections and sensations as a way to gain awareness itself. Yeah. So
let me just say in regard to that, you know, because I love yoga. I mean, I've been practicing yoga basically my entire adult life.
Yeah.
But whether it's yoga or different streams of meditation, it's very, very important to recognize or understand that at its heart, mindfulness is a non-dual practice. And there are instrumental ways to actually cultivate mindfulness that look like you're trying to get better at something, just the way, whatever you practice, you get better at it. There's another way, which is equally important, which is the non-instrumental. And these are both equally valid in every single moment. So the non-instrumental is, as I said, in the Heart Sutra, there's no place to go, nothing to do, and nothing to attain. The irony of it is when you hold that non-instrumental awareness sing, all attainment becomes possible. Whereas before, if you're stuck trying to get somewhere, this is kind of the kiss of death for any kind of real illumination in meditative domains, because you're always stuck not being where you want to be. And then there's this separation, and the part of you that's trying to get there is actually the smallest part of you and the most contracted in a way.
Thank you. Thanks for joining us, David. You have a question from Florida.
Question is, could you talk some more about the concept of intergenerational trauma? Are you saying that the trauma of parents can be genetically passed to the next generation or generations?
Yeah, I mean, that's accepted in the scientific community, actually, that, you know, there are epigenetic changes that are transmitted through generations. That is, changes to the actual DNA and the chromosomal structure. But I was referring to not that in particular, but to just the sense that you know, the grief of trauma in a family has repercussions throughout the generations. And whether we're talking about Native, the original genocide of the Native Americans in this country, I mean, you know, unimaginable levels of trauma, starting with Christopher Columbus and Bartolomé de las Casas documented a lot of what Columbus and his sailors did to the native peoples when they arrived here and completely decimated them. So whether it's that or whether it's 400 years of enslavement of African people, that trauma moves through the generations. And I don't mean just genetically or epigenetically, it moves through on a million different levels. And we're coming to understand that in a way that's beyond merely feeling the trauma, but actually realizing this is a very, very important phenomenon to address. And at a national level for us, because so much of it is woven into our history in a way that we've never been willing to actually recognize. So it's huge. It's huge. And so what we're talking about is we're talking about healing the planet. We're talking about healing in the United States, at least healing the United States of America, as well as healing ourselves and our communities. Whether it's COVID or whether it's the next pandemic or whether it's just the separation and the vituperousness of, you know, between the different parties, political parties. This is all a prescription for deep toxicity and ongoing toxicity, and everybody is affected by that, but primarily people of color, indigenous people, people who, or say, you know, the families of people who were killed in the Nazi concentration camps. That is very real. And you know, suffering is the sort of core first noble truth that the Buddha articulated, was that there is suffering. It's not life is suffering, but that there is suffering, and that there's, he articulated in a kind of medical way that the fourfold, you know, the diagnosis, suffering. It's an element of humanity that we need to deal with because it's a disease. The etiology of it is that there is a cause for this suffering. And the cause is our misapprehending of who we are. So that we are sort of basically mistaking our own true nature. And we're attached to a particular view of self or craving for something, for me, I, me, and mine. So that's the diagnosis, the etiology. The prognosis is, hey, it's a good prognosis, according to the Buddha, that there is a way out of this suffering. And then the treatment plan is the Eightfold Noble Path, and the mindfulness is one of those 8 path factors. And I think many people recognize that all those path factors are actually completely interpenetrating. So any way in includes every way in. So you've asked a very profound question, and I've tried to respond to it, but it really is the conversation for much more and back and forth dialogue. Is there anything you want to say in response to my response to you from where the question originated in the first place? Was it just mere curiosity?
Well, my parents were both Holocaust survivors.
Well, there you
so
go.
When I hear the term intergenerational trauma, I think, you know, I'm thinking, is it something genetic? And so that's where that question came from.
It could be epigenetic, but it's certainly more than that. I mean, just the you know, the grief that they went through, the unimaginable horrors of that kind of thing, of what human beings do to other human beings. So we won't go into what that was like for you as a child or anything like that, but I think it's, broadly recognized that these things have consequences, and they have consequences on a lot of different levels for not only children, but grandchildren, and on for many generations. And rightfully so, in a way, because the indignity, the grotesqueness of having our ancestors be devalued, dehumanized, and destroyed in the most unimaginably horrific ways. It's like, that doesn't go away just because it's 100 years later, or 50 years later, or 1,000 years later.
Thank you, David, for.
Thank you for asking that question, because, again, the circumstances of this are such that we can only touch on a lot of the profound elements of what this whole 4 days of our dialoguing around mindfulness and wisdom and emotions is bringing to the fore. But this is the curriculum for the rest of our lives, whoever we are, whatever our history. And we have a lot to learn from each other. So I wish we could actually have multi-day classes and workshops where, you could talk about your experience and other people could talk about theirs. And so I urge everybody who's on this call to, in fact, make sure that if it's possible, you do that with your community, because we are all deeply interconnected. And so it may not happen with whoever the teachers are on, in these 4 days, but I'm trying to say that the real teacher is life itself. It's not any of us. And you can always get the information and look at, video and, recordings of all of these things. But ultimately, this is a kind of deep inquiry that requires me to sit down with myself, whoever I am, and recognize what it means to be human in the unique form of you. And that how, even though it's incredibly unique, we're all basically, in some profound ways, the same and also not the same. So again, paradox. The thinking mind can't really deal with that, but awareness has and loving kindness and compassion, no problem with that at all. So I wish you all the best, and again, deep appreciation for articulating this question.
Thank you, David. So John, we just have one more kind of group inquiry for you. Many people have asked about the poem that you recited. Could you share the writer and the title?
Oh, yeah, sure. And let me say, it's an interesting piece of evidence that I did share this poem by Derek Walcott, W-A-L-C-O-T-T, Derek, first name. And you got a lot of questions about it, right? Mm-hmm. There's a reason for this. There are ways that the mind functions where thinking just doesn't do it. Thinking and enunciating anything in sentences, full sentences and paragraphs, or reading, only goes into certain circuits in the brain, so to speak. But what poets do is they take language and they try to, and great poets succeed in taking words and allowing them, or finding a way for them to say what it's not possible to say in words. So there's a very interesting connection to silence in poetry. Mm-hmm. And the words coming out, but they're not in kind of propositional kind of order. They are what's called by John Teasdale an implicational holistic order that brings meaning that resonates immediately. So the poem is called Love After Love. It's in one of my books, I think, Coming to Our Senses, but it's easily available on the internet. And it, Walcott wrote a lot of very long poems, but this is a short one. And when you learn it by heart, when you bring it into your heart, as with all great poetry, it lives inside you. It's again like a meme or a virus, but a very positive virus, that the poetry can, just like music, can actually resonate down to the level of your genes and chromosomes and cells in a way that changes you. And so this poetic wisdom or poetic imagination is completely interpenetrating silence and dharma and what you bring to the cushion when you take your seat. And I'm using that metaphorically. Right. So whenever you drop in, no matter where you are, your life is pure poetry.
Yeah.
Can you actually see that? And your culture is pure poetry.
That's right.
So recognizing that, and then that would be true for song and all sorts of different artistic expressions, dance. There are so many different doors into this room of open-hearted wakefulness. Yeah. And the invitation is to enter a doorway. It doesn't matter which doorway. There are many wrong ways to practice mindfulness, plenty of them. That's why it's helpful to read books and have teachers and guidance and stuff like that. But there's no one right way to do it. And if you listen to all the various meditation teachers, they're all saying the same things. They're all saying it totally differently. And the nuances are incredibly important. And while we're not trying to get anywhere, when you engage in mindfulness cultivation in this kind of a way, just like what I said about poetry, it grows you over time so that you don't have to try to get anywhere, but you wind up becoming who you really, really, really are in a way that you don't have a chance if you set out to get somewhere else. It's one of the beautiful ironies and paradoxes of this practice that, again, there's the instrumental, which is all the doing, but there's also the being, the non-instrumental, and it occurs outside of time. So that means you have plenty of time too, and no time at all. So it's only now. And the stakes are always really high because ultimately it's like, are we going to lose ourselves, betray ourselves, or be ourselves?
Yeah.
And that becomes a koan, a Zen koan, but we won't go on about
there's so much. Thank you so much, John. I mean, even just the closing of like why it's so important, you know, the Inspiring Mind show that we do at Mind and Life, like bringing together that action and the contemplation and the research and the art. And it's just so like, we learned so much from you today. I just want to thank you so much for your wisdom, your big heart, everything that you shared with the audience. And just sharing that beautiful, rich live practice. Is there just maybe like one word, one sentence, a short offering to leave the audience with?
My short offering would be, this is it. Mm-hmm. Don't let a chance like this go by. That's a quote actually from Kabir, another great, you know, wisdom poet of India. Don't let a chance like this go by. This moment is all we have. Let's listen very, very deeply to what it's calling out from us. And then trust that you're good enough, that you're worthy enough, that there's nothing wrong with you, that you're already okay, that you're already whole, no matter what your narratives about how, what's happened in the past or what your, deficits might be, all of that kind of depressive rumination and anxiety and everything else, that's not who you are. So let life be your meditation teacher.
Thank
And
you.
every moment, the good ones, the bad ones, the ugly ones, the humiliating ones, the appalling ones, it's all a question of how am I going to be in relationship to this moment with full integrity, ethically, causing as little harm by omission or commission as possible, and as much benefit as broadly as possible without any attachment to outcome.
Yeah.
And it's for life. It's a love affair, and it's for life. And we're all one big community. And one of my greatest pleasures is actually running into people and having conversations about how this practice, in some sense, illuminated or enlivened other people's worlds at particular moments.
Yeah.
And they're so unimaginably powerful. It's never coming from the Dharma teacher. It's coming from the Dharma.
Such deep insights. And just thank you again. And you're all going to have so many more opportunities to experience what John just invited in to day 4 of the Science and Wisdom of Emotions
I'm
Summit.
looking forward to it.
Thank you. I'm going to be leading a live welcome to day 4 in a few hours at 7 p.m. Eastern, and talking about the possibility of using our mind for our own liberation, as well as sharing the schedule for today's events. And then all day 4 sessions are going to become available on the summit homepage right after I share. We have an amazing lineup for you, including the summit keynote with His Holiness the Dalai Lama, who will be in dialogue with Richie Davidson, Dan Goleman. It's a rich conversation that explores a wide range of topics, including His Holiness's latest ideas about new directions for scientific inquiry into emotions and how we can meet social injustice with compassion, the importance of ethics as the basis of living a happy life, and our common responsibility to build a peaceful and happy future as a global community. So big takeaways to be had on day 4. Thank you again, and a deep appreciation to John, to the Mind and Life Institute, and to the Awake Network. And we look forward to seeing you all very soon. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.